Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Josh is Severe Weather, and happy Wednesday to you. Hope everybody's had a great week so far. And the tropics continue to be a huge enigma to those of us here that are forecasting an active season. So, what's going on? Well, we are not seeing a lot survive the African coastline. It's been that way for the last month or so. The storms have coming off a little bit too far north into cooler waters, into dry Saharan dust. And as a result, nothing's really developing east of the islands. It takes until we get through the Western Caribbean and eventually the Gulf before we can see anything develop. And that just hasn't happened over the last month or so. Happened earlier in the season, back in June and early July. Then we had systems come into the eastern part of the Caribbean and up into the Southwest Atlantic, but things have shut down for a month. This does not mean we are totally finished, that the forecasts are going to be a total bust. It just means we're in a quiet period. Now, that could change as we head towards next week. We've got a wave which has failed to develop, now moving south of Jamaica, and that could still spin up into a weaker system, a tropical depression or so, as it heads towards Belize here early in the weekend. After that, we may see whatever's left of this move into the southwestern Gulf and a cold front come down. And at some point, there could be somewhat of a merger of the two systems into a tropical disturbance and eventually a tropical depression and even possibly a tropical storm. The part of the Atlantic basin that is most favorable water temperature wise for something to strengthen is the southwestern Gulf right now. The Northwest Caribbean is also favorable, but we have not seen the wind direction, the wind shear being favorable to any development in the Western Caribbean. A lot of hot water, but just nowhere for anything to form. As we head to next week, though, we may see this development take place in the Gulf. And then after that, some uncertainty. We have continued signals for something that may try to drift up towards the Gulf Coast. At the same time, if this feature stays weak, it could stay suppressed and drift back westward into Mexico. So at this point, we have a lot of question marks. We know there will be something in this area. We know that there's a potential this could merge and bring a lot of rainfall to areas along this front here in the northern Gulf next week. What we don't know is, could this become a hurricane? Could it stay weak? May it fail to develop? So what I'm going to do in this video is break down the possibilities for you guys because it is important. A lot of us like to plan trips, and a lot of us live on the Gulf Coast and are already on edge due to all the storms we've had in recent years. And as you know, with very warm water, it may not take much time for something to spin up and form very quickly and intensify rapidly. I don't see that happening at this point just yet, but it certainly could happen. And we are seeing that in the Western Pacific with a system that moved off the Philippines as a tropical storm yesterday, now likely to become a super typhoon in less than 2 days. This is Yagi, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit here later in the video. But let's shift to the Atlantic first, where obviously we could see impacts in the next couple of weeks. Here's our first disturbance right now, continuing to show just a very lopsided circulation to it. Very little low-level circulation, but we have a flare-up of storms affecting Haiti and now moving into Jamaica. This will continue westward into a favorable part of the northwestern Caribbean Sea, but it will run out of time to generate much of a circulation. It's going to be on its last legs before it moves onshore here. So as a result, it's got a very low chance at this point of developing. We do have two other waves to keep an eye on. One is halfway between the Lesser Antilles and the Cabo Verdes. It has shown signs of some flare-ups, but really nothing more than that. The next wave behind it, again, is not exactly in a favorable spot. What's going on here is that you can see here this dry Saharan air in place. This creates sinking motions in the atmosphere and keeps storms from flaring up and developing a circulation. During our hyperactive seasons, what happens is this eventually gets pushed back into Africa, and we see rising air, and we see thunderstorm activity like this generate more solid circulations. You would see a circulation here, a circulation here, a circulation here. And unfortunately, everything is struggling for the time being, making forecasts a lot more challenging. We'd all love to just track storms that develop and hopefully stay out to sea. At least that's what we hope. But that's not been the case. Instead, the struggle has been real. Well, you can see here that the ITCZ is up here at about 15 degrees north. That's the intertropical convergence zone where our monsoon trough sets up. That is too far north over the eastern Atlantic to see storms form. The water's too cool up here. What we need to see is this shift back down into here, which is where Beryl formed. and where Ernesto eventually formed as well, originated from here before it developed in this area. So we are not yet in a spot to see anything develop. And here we go into the first and second weeks of September, and nothing is formed in the last month. Pretty crazy to see that, but it is the case right now. Just goes to show that seasonal forecasts, while obviously we've got a lot of potential, still have a lot of skill to be resolved here. And I personally will take some blame for it because I expected us to have about 10 storms by now, and we've only had 5. And that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes. So anyway, we can't change the past. All we can really do is do our best to move forward here and still do a good job of forecasting. And here you can see our 3 systems lined up. All of them are yellow, indicating a low chance of development over the next week. Here's a look at the tropics as a whole, and you can see we definitely have a front here in place off the coastline of the southeast and drifting along the Texas coast. And a lot of rain is impacting you on the Gulf Coast. So even though we don't have a named storm, we're getting a lot of rain, and that's never good for anybody. And then here's our disturbance south of Jamaica, and the flare-up is on the northeastern side of it. Here's our next wave over here. It is getting hit by wind shear out of the southwest, so a very small window to form. Probably not going to do anything in here. The next wave here is farther down, but the better circulation is actually up in here, and only one model really shows it developing when it gets out into here, and then it gets kicked away. So all in all here, this is what we want to see for the first week of September, and we would love to keep it that way. Now, the Gulf is not favorable for development at this point. We do have our front continuing to be stalled here near the Texas coast. Heavy rainfall in different segments of the coastline here. Heavy rain as well popping up with heating of the day around New Orleans and the Mississippi coastline. And if you're in northern Florida, we got a lot of rain in the Jacksonville area this morning. That has shifted offshore, but another blob of rain getting ready to move on to the Gulf Coast of Florida here. South Florida, not in bad shape, but we are seeing our typical slow movers in the afternoon here. But overall, the wind flow aloft is very strong. This wind shear creating very poor conditions for development at the time. And I do want to show you guys the visible satellite here as well. I don't know why. There we go. I've had tech issues all week. It's like, can't win that battle either, apparently. But here we go. Looking at the satellite image, you can see lots of thunderstorm action, but no defined circulation at this point. There is a bit of an upper level low over Texas. And if I bring up the water vapor, you'll actually be able to see that here just off my map. But you see these darker blues indicating some dry air aloft. There is an upper level feature here, keeping temperatures down in Texas and allowing somewhat of a southerly flow here and some kind of coastal convergence. When we have these convergences of air masses, we see more rainfall and more rising motion, but no surface circulation. So we may see something develop on this front here as it drifts southeastward here towards the weekend, but really nothing strong at this point. So rain is the big deal for now. Tropical development is not the big deal. And here's our potential rain over the next 10 days. You can see amounts over a foot just off the coast, but close to a foot around Fort Bend and Galveston, and 14 inches in Brownsville if you average the models together. Southeast Louisiana, 7 to 10 inches, and drifting farther to the east here across the southeastern United States. Significant amounts of rain as well along our boundary, potentially more than a foot, maybe even 18 inches just off the coast of Apalachicola. 10 inches in southeast Georgia, 8 to 10 inches over northeastern Florida. And some of this moisture is going to try to sneak up the southeast coast, but it probably won't get much into the Carolinas, at least through this weekend. Next week, we may see a low pressure feature come up here into the southeast and bring significant rain to southeast Georgia, the Carolinas, maybe Virginia as well, towards the weekend. So over the short term, we have a marginal to slight risk of excessive rain today over the south central states. Tomorrow, same, Louisiana, Mississippi, far southeast Texas. And then that area shifts eastward, dries out the Houston area as we get to Friday and Friday night. But still New Orleans, Gulfport, Mobile, all the way over to the Big Bend of Florida has the risk for some excessive rain and maybe some flooding. Here's a look at the Caribbean. This is our feature right now. You can see just a very poorly defined circulation center. This is Jamaica right here. This is Honduras. This system is going to continue here. It will move into more favorable wind flow aloft, but it's going to run out of room to develop before it moves into Belize, I believe, here by the time we get towards Saturday morning. You can see heavier showers getting ready to move into Kingston, Jamaica, and lots of lightning offshore here. So we'll get nasty here as the day wears on into tonight across Jamaica, but no development expected at this point. Looking across the rest of the Northwest Atlantic, here's our boundary. No defined circulation, but we do have major flare-ups along our front, and it will turn more unsettled as we get towards Bermuda here. You can see the front is approaching in Bermuda, which is right here. So that is a look at the Northwestern Atlantic. Let's take a look out to sea here. And you can see, again, just nothing persisting other than disorganized showers and storms over the central Atlantic. Same goes for the eastern Atlantic. We continue to have waves moving through, but they're coming by a little bit too far to the north. They are coming out at 15 north. The water's a lot cooler and more stable in here. What we do need is to see them down in here if we really want to see development. And that may shift as we get later into the month of September, but for the time being, it's not looking that way. Here's a look at our ensembles. And you can see here, while this particular model tries to develop something here, it's probably a non-tropical low affecting Atlantic Canada as we get into the beginning of next week, Sunday and Monday. But here's our area in the Gulf that we do need to watch, and you can see chances begin to climb here later next week across the entire southwest Gulf. There are lower chances as we look up towards Louisiana of a tropical system. And then we may start to see some development again off the African coast, but I'll believe it when I see it at this point. If we take a closer look at the Gulf of Mexico here, you can see our chance for gradual development starts as we get to Sunday here in the Bay of Campeche and begins to climb slowly northward as we get to next Monday and Tuesday. By September 11th, we have about a 50-50 shot of a tropical storm here in the southwestern Gulf. As we get to the second half of next week, some ensemble solutions bring this up northeastward towards Louisiana. Others keep it buried here for a while longer. And I'm going to talk about why that is here in just a second. Here's a look at our upper level flow, and you can see we have a big area of high pressure. I talked about this in yesterday's video, but our Bermuda high here is extending back to southern Florida and into the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. Here's our big area of high pressure. There's our little feature that's moving by northeast of Puerto Rico. And then here's our weakness that's moving into Belize. This is over the weekend. This feature is going to go underneath the ridge of high pressure, but here's the problem. We have a massive area of high pressure as well, nosing into Oklahoma and Texas over the southwest. I saw Phoenix hit 100 degrees for the 100th time this summer, which is obscene if you ask me. That's why I don't live in Arizona, but that area of high pressure is camping out there and it's not going to go anywhere. What will happen is we are going to continue to see fall-like shots of cooler air coming down from central Canada into the eastern United States. But as these troughs drop down, we may see little pieces get stuck behind, and that's going to keep our boundary left over here in the northern Gulf pretty much stuck here as we head through the weekend. It's got really nowhere to escape. So as we move on into next week, we continue to see this high pressure still nosing into the eastern Gulf. This is great news for Florida. Here's our high right in here. Here's the trough that's lifting out. Here's the upper level low that's kind of stuck in Texas and Louisiana, keeping things wet across this area. And there's just nowhere for whatever to form to escape. It can't go west because this ridge is cut off here by this upper low. It can't go east because of the ridge. It could go across Mexico, but unlikely. So it's just stuck here for several more days as we head into next week. Later in the week, you can see it may get picked up by this upper level low. And again, uncertainty is going to grow as we get to that point. So if you run the European model 50 times, which this ensemble does, you get 50 different scenarios. All of them show a weaker system in the southwest Gulf. Some show a stronger system coming up towards Texas or Louisiana, maybe even towards Mississippi. Now today, we don't have nearly as many ensembles showing a stronger storm, which is good news, but we do still have some hurricane potential. I would say more likely, though, a stronger tropical storm is something we could be dealing with here across Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. There's also several solutions that keep it down here for several more days. It may not even be out of the southwest Gulf by next Friday. It may still be camping out there taking an extended cruise. So I can show you all the operational models in the world. They're all going to look different, but they all show kind of the same idea that a boundary gets stuck here and has nowhere to go, and we have tropical moisture that gets infused into it. Whether or not low pressure forms is still going to be somewhat unclear until we probably get to the beginning of next week. The European AI does show some development here. You can see that we've got low pressure in the far western Gulf of Mexico next Tuesday. It's a pretty weak system, but it can't go inland because of that blocking high that's over the southwest. So it just lingers and then starts to build some intensity as it moves back slowly north or eastward. And we may have a formidable tropical storm at this point by the end of next week. This model takes it up into Mobile Bay. The Canadian model has shown some solutions like that. It's backed off a little bit today, shows it drifting west into Mexico, which is what I would expect if we had a more progressive solution, which we don't. And then the icon model, which is a bit of an outlier at this point, sorry about that, shows development and shows a system that gets stuck. It actually develops this low pressure along our boundary, and then it brings our wave up from Belize and the Yucatan, and the two kind of merge into maybe a bigger system that's not speeding up and not going anywhere through early next week, but eventually developing. And we see a tropical storm here just hovering near the Texas-Mexico border by next Tuesday. And unfortunately, it can't go inland and weaken. It's going to be stuck and may try to linger and drift back into the Gulf. And this would be the worst case scenario because we've got a very uncertain scenario at this point. We've got very warm water and we've got lower than average wind shear. So this would be the worst case. It's not my official forecast. It's just one that I think we need to watch at this point. And then finally, the GFS model here, the one that's just trickling in now, not really showing any development, which again, a few days ago, it showed a Category 4 storm. Now it shows nothing, just not very stable. This model is all over the place, so we can't really put too much investment into it. Rain is going to be heavy, though, regardless of what does or doesn't develop. Here's the European over the next 10 days. You can see the worst of it stays offshore, but we have potentially 1 to 2 feet of rain here south of Texas and several inches as well near the Florida coast, as well as over southern Louisiana. The icon model is more extreme because it does show that tropical development. And we're off the charts here if that happens. If a storm sits here for a week, then we could see several feet of rain. I don't think we're going to see that, but we could if this model ends up being right, and that's a big if. So that's all I got to talk about in the Atlantic. Until something forms, we're just going to have to speculate. In the Western Pacific, 3 features to watch. This is the remains of Hona, not tropical. Here's a new tropical depression that may come up close to but turn away from Japan. Here's the bad boy, unfortunately, Typhoon Yagi, which continues to strengthen very rapidly here and has its aim on southern China here, has its eye on southern China. Here you can see this was a tropical storm this time yesterday. This is Taiwan. This is southern China, and it is now intensifying up to a Category 3 to 4 typhoon here, likely to become a super typhoon here. You can see the forecast by this time tomorrow morning is 150 to 160 miles per hour. It'll weaken a little bit as it comes into southern China, but it will have a direct hit here on northern Hainan and maybe in places like Juyin and Laizhou before it heads into Vietnam here and weakens. And you can see the HWRF model is showing that deepening continuing up until about this time tomorrow, and then maybe some gradual weakening after that, but could be what we would call a Category 5 in the Atlantic Basin and Eastern Pacific. So that's all I got for you today. Again, I've been speculating a lot. Things have changed. This forecast will change again. If there's anything I've learned in meteorology, it's that the only constant has changed and we just can't defeat Mother Nature. So I appreciate y'all's time. For those of you that have been patient with me, I appreciate it. I would love to know more, but I just don't. I can't outdo powers beyond us when it comes to forecasting. All I can really do is just prepare folks. So as always, if you do want to be more prepared and want to see what's going on, please consider becoming a subscriber and joining my community. And I just ask that everybody be respectful to each other. We all have different beliefs here, but we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, and that is to watch out for each other and be good stewards of this environment and of this earth. And as a Christian man, as a believer in God, somebody who believes in Jesus and his promises, I give all the honor and glory to him. He gives me this gift every day to share with you guys, and God is good to me. And honestly, he loves everybody. But Paul tells the church of Rome, Romans 8:28, that, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. I truly believe that you have a purpose in life. I have a purpose. We all have a different purpose. God has given us all different gifts. But those who love God are the ones that will have the good things happen to them. Those who don't love God eternally, who have not made the choice to follow him and to follow Jesus, their future is uncertain. And I just didn't want to take a chance and have an uncertain eternal future. I decided that regardless, I was going to put my faith in the unseen and that God would continue to bless me. And I pray that he blesses you in many ways. I'm here to encourage you and pray for you no matter what you're going through today, but just know that we have a wonderful God that does wonderful things, but there is evil in the world that must be defeated. And it's already been defeated through Jesus' sacrifice. I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. God bless you.